Thank you for joining us. We are, hold on, let me grab my paper here. We are resuming a meeting here at this point from our last meeting, and I'm going to ask Teresa Moreland if she would do a roll call, please.
Margaret McCormick.
Here.
Betty Washington.
Here.
Brian Adams.
Present.
Richard Haddock. And Matt Brewer.
Here.
Okay, so everyone is here. We are ready to get underway with the item Kechi Road and Oliver project updates and projections. And with that, Bob, I will turn it over to you.
Well, the purpose of this workshop this evening is to review the latest information that we have and also share with the council our best guess projections, and that's exactly what they are. They're based on certain assumptions on the economy, so we want to present what we know so far, the information we've been provided, and some options within the possible financing to help the council arrive at a decision. Of course, we won't be making this decision. The council won't be in this workshop this evening. This is for discussion only, and that the discussion will preface. Give time to ask adequate questions and allow time to answer those questions before we get into the regular meeting. I am going to ask during the regular meeting tonight that the council decide exactly which way they want to go with the utilities, and then we will discuss some of those different options in this workshop at this time. And discussion certainly will ensue before any vote is taken in the regular meeting. But I just wanted to remind everyone that there's no action that can take place out of this workshop. So with that, our finance director, Cami Schroff, has done a really great job of putting together some numbers and some information. You won't find any better projections than what she's arrived at here. She's worked closely with our financial advisor, and so what you're seeing is the latest information there is on this particular project. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Schroff.
Good evening, Cami Schroff, your finance director. I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can go through. Bob, it says that you've disabled participant screen sharing.
Bear with me just a moment. Let me see what I have for screen sharing. There we go. That should have opened it up for you.
Police custody. Tonight, John's police chief is voicing his opinion of the situation.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, Emily, Chief Ramsey tells me he's
Okay.
We do have some audio in the background. It sounds like somebody's got their TV on.
And awareness of what was happening.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen and see the presentation? Yes. Okay. So this presentation is just to help give you a framework of the total project cost for the Kechi Road and Oliver Road project. It'll also help show what some of our estimated annual debt service payments will be for the cost of that project. So instead of just saying it's going to cost $2 million, for example, I can actually show you what some of those debt payments will look like on a yearly basis for the life of the bond. So we'll start with total project cost as they are today. So we've had PEC come and they presented the same figures before. These were also included in our, when we submitted the extension for the project, the deadline extension, these numbers were included in that as well. So the total cost that we're looking at for the project that the city would bear is $2.5 million. And that's broke out between moving the utilities, which includes Evergy, Cox, AT&T, PEC design of the project, right-of-way acquisition. We have grant matches in there. And then eventually later down the road, we have cost for a streetscape as well. And kind of each one of these, the financing is kind of done in phasing. So we have different portions of the financing coming on in different years. The grant match for this will be about $1.5 million for the project. So if we look at what the debt service payments will look like on an annual basis, kind of the blue bar is going to be what your debt service payment will be each year for moving the utilities. The orange bar is the debt service for the tip notes that we took out to pay PEC, and then for our grant match as well. Those will be rolled into the same bond. And then we also have the portion of the streetscape that will start in 2024 is the plan right now. So you can kind of see where those different portions of the financing and which year they start and how much they are. And then when some of them start falling off in 2042 as well. And then I also did a general fund projection of what those annual debt service payments will do, how those will impact our fund balance if we don't have any additional revenue sources, if we just plan on using fund balance to pay for this project. So of course, this general fund forecast also has in my revenue reductions that I'm projecting due to COVID-19 as well. So we have kind of multiple things going on in the forecast. But as you can see later in 2021, you know, we start getting into the negative with our fund balance. So, and you'll kind of see this trend throughout the presentation is that I would really encourage researching and considering additional revenue sources in order to do this capital project. The second assumption I'm going to walk through is if we went back to the table with Evergy and we tried to get their estimate down to 700,000. I think currently it's at $800,000, and how that would affect our debt payments, what that total amount would be for the project, and then what impact that would have on our fund balance. So if we went back to the table with Evergy and paid them $100,000 or $700,000 to put the utility lines underground, that would reduce the cost of the project by $200,000. So instead of being 2.5 million, we're now looking at spending 2.3 million on the project and still receiving the $1.5 million in grant match. If you compare this to the previous debt service payments, there's really not much change. We still have the same three categories, the moving the utilities, the temp note and grant match, and the streetscape. And then I do have another slide later that'll kind of summarize all of these assumptions together so you can really see the difference in the annual financing. And then once I lay those numbers into the general fund forecast, as you can see, we still are dropping into the negative with our fund balance, and we'll need to secure an additional revenue source in order to fund this project.
So let me understand, in this assumption, Evergy would reduce their costs to 0.7 million. Is that correct?
So currently Evergy's costs are estimated at around 800,000. And so this would be Evergy reducing their costs by another $100,000.
So the city then, okay, then the city still has cost of 823, over $800,000, correct?
For the movement of the utilities.
Yes.
So that also includes moving the Cox utilities and the AT&T utilities. So it's not solely, that number is not solely Evergy.
So it'd be
It's
interesting
mainly
to,
Evergy, but it's not solely Evergy.
it would be not just interesting, I'd like to know what the various utilities are charging to move the utilities.
I think I can answer that. The tentative numbers I have gotten from Cox Communications is $70,000. That has not been negotiated yet. I've reached out to them on 2 separate occasions and not heard back from them. So I think that's in question. That number could range from 0 to the amount that they're asking at this point. AT&T has not offered any amounts at all. They're going to move their utilities at no cost.
So Evergy, if Cox is estimated at 70,000, then that is the bulk of it is Evergy's cost.
The bulk of it is Evergy.
Right. Okay. So those numbers, Bob, the Cox figure and the AT&T figure should be the same throughout this presentation.
Yes.
That's correct. We're working under the assumption that we've been left with the figures we've been left with is our assumption.
Okay.
So the third assumption would be if Evergy reduced their cost to $600,000, that reduces the total cost of the project to $2.2 million from the original $2.5 million. And then again, you can see there's just a slight change in the debt service payment. And then again, even with this assumption, we're needing to secure an additional revenue source. The final assumption that we have is if the utilities were to remain above ground. And this assumption also includes $100,000 for redesign. PEC has mentioned that they would need to go back and redo some of their design work. We know some of the other utilities will need to go back and do redesigns as well. And so we put $100,000 into this number for redesign. You can see that drops our move utilities estimate significantly to $142,000, and it drops the total cost of the project to approximately $1.6 million. We still have the original PEC cost of $207,000 for the original design. We still will probably have some right-of-way acquisition that we need to make for the new utility poles for Evergy. We still have the same grant match, and we still have the same assumption for the streetscape in there. And then here's what the annual debt service payments will look like. They're hovering right around $125,000 a year. You can see the moving of the utilities is a smaller portion now of our total debt service payment. However, even with that significant reduction in the project, we still are looking at wanting to secure some additional revenue sources just to make sure we're able to pay that bond every year. And then this graph is showing each one of the assumptions I just walked through and what the annual debt service payments look like. So the very top line, the blue line, that's the total project cost. So that's a total of 2.5 million that the city would incur for the project. The orange line is the assumption if Evergy was to reduce their estimate to $700,000, and then the city would be responsible for $2.3 million of the total project. The gray line is the assumption if Evergy reduces their cost to $600,000, and the total project cost would be around 2.2 million. And then the yellow line is if we were to keep the utilities above ground with a total project cost of 1.6 million. And that's what our annual debt service payments would be. So you've heard me talk about wanting to secure some additional revenue sources just to secure the funding for this project. There's a couple options that I have to throw on the table just to kind of get us talking about them. You know, we could also do a mix of these options or even other options. You know, we can definitely use some fund balance in combination with some of these options. It's just starting the conversation. In 2024 and in 2026, we're going to have some PBC or the Public Building Commission bonds fall off. So right now we're paying bonds on City Hall and we're paying bonds on the police department building as well. So in 2024, the City Hall bond will fall off, and that's approximately $70,000 a year that we're paying for that. And then in 2026, the police department bond will fall off, and we're paying about $20,000 a year for that building. So those funds will be able to be reallocated for different things once those bonds are complete. Currently, we transfer about $100,000 to the highway fund from the general fund on an annual basis. We are required by policy to transfer 3 mills to the street fund. Currently in the 2020 budget, we actually transferred 6 mills to the street fund. If we were just to reduce that transfer back down to the required 3 mills, we would be able to free up $60,000 in order to use for something different. And then the last couple things are really looking at establishing new funding sources. So we can always look at raising the mill levy to cover a portion of the project or to free up other funds in order to use for the project. We can also implement a 1% to 2% local sales tax in order to supplant some of our funds that we're transferring to the street fund to free up about $120,000 a year. And local sales tax really can only be used for certain things, and streets is one of those things that sales tax can be implemented in order to do. Right now, we're also funding our stormwater fund from a transfer from the general fund. It's currently, the transfer is $100,000. If we were to issue a stormwater fee, we would be able to provide those services through the fee and free up $100,000 in order to use for other projects. There's also some additional considerations to take into account with our utility funds that we're kind of working through right now. For the Kechi Road and Oliver project, we are looking at relocating some of our gas lines. This will be funded through the gas fund. We're looking at that project costing about $1 million. It is related to Kechi Road and Oliver, but it was also a planned capital project already. So whether we go through with the Kechi Road and Oliver project, we will still probably be looking at moving the gas mains at some point and still incurring that $1 million project. Since this will be funded by the gas fund, there is the potential that eventually we'll have to look at the gas rate and just make sure we're bringing in enough revenue in order to cover that debt service. We are also looking at a sewer rehabilitation project. I do know that the sewer rate needs to be updated. The total for that project is 1.7 million. It's not related to the Kechi Road and Oliver project at all, but it's a big project that we're starting to undertake. It will be bond financed through the sewer fund. We will see an increase in the sewer rates. And right now, the expenses we're incurring from the city of Wichita are greater than the revenue we're bringing in right now from our customers. So that's definitely something that's on my plate, and there'll probably be more to come on that at the retreat. So that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
So Kimmy, I have a question. This is Matt. So in 2024, the City Hall drops off 2026, the police department, and combined, that's about 90,000 a year. Is that what I remember you said?
Yes. Yes.
And then the difference between the power lines above ground and below ground per year, if I'm looking at your chart correctly, is about 75,000 per year. Is that correct? That chart there?
Yeah, it can be anywhere from 75,000 to 50,000, or 50,000 to 75,000 a year.
Okay. So we have 90,000 dropping off as of 2024, 2026.
Yes.
And the difference there is 50 to 75,000, correct? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So I'm curious, sales tax revenue the city currently gets and what 1% would do to the revenue?
So I have some previous projections that I've seen on sales tax. I don't have the total current sales tax we brought in this last year, but based off of a 1% sales tax, we look at bringing in about $90,000 a year.
The one constant, I think, and the takeaway from this is regardless of which one of these options the council wishes to pursue, assuming the council wants to move ahead with this project, is that the city needs to look at new revenue sources regardless of any one of these decisions. This is something we've been discussing for a while, and alternate or additional revenue sources have been on the back burner, and we've discussed several different things over the years. But and these are separate from the utilities. They're self-supporting, or they should be and will be once we make the necessary corrections. But this is just strictly for the fund balance itself. And we are fortunate at this time that we do have a healthy fund balance, but this is a one-shot deal with our fund balance. As we start spending it down, and with our budgeting projections and the way we budget, it's not going to refill as quickly as it has in the past.
Cammy, this is Brian Adams. Thank you for the completeness of your data here. The two bonds coming off in 24 and 26, I understand those. Are those the only two that are coming off anytime in the foreseeable future?
So sorry.
Go ahead.
They're the only two that are funded with general fund dollars. So the other bonds we have are either paid through special assessment or they're in the utility funds.
Okay, that makes sense. So my concern with those two is those are quite a ways out beyond where we start going negative. So that's a major concern. The 3 and 6 mills that are going into the highway fund, if memory serves me correctly, and Bob, you correct me where I'm wrong, I believe we put that in place a couple years ago for the very sole purpose was because we saw the train coming at us for taking care of the existing streets with all the capital projects we were going to have to take on just to take care of the existing streets. Is that correct?
That's correct. And not just streets, but that's the one where we had a 3 mil increase passed, and I don't remember the year. I think it was 2015 or 2016.
I think it was 16.
That increase, and there's no policy with that. It's just, it was decided in passing that mill that the city would dedicate those 3 mills to streets. It's operated that way since we passed that, but we have no policy to assure that. We are moving the 3 mills over on the honor system into streets and funding accordingly. Except for this last year, we moved 6 mills into streets to do that. That being said, that does not address the delayed or deferred maintenance on our other utilities that have been neglected for a number of years. So when we did a great job of putting the funds into streets because that was our immediate need, but now we're seeing our other utilities are starting to fall apart, for lack of a better word. I mean, not to the point of total failure, but the maintenance has not been there over the years. The city has done a good job of building infrastructure, but hasn't really done a great job of investing in the ongoing maintenance. The funds that have been put into reserves have been minimal at best, and without dedicated funding sources, we are going to be facing some major expenses with regards to our other utilities.
Which
so much
utilities
water,
specifically?
not so much with water, but with sewer and gas. Those are we're facing some improvements that we will, not necessarily improvements, but maintenance issues that we're way behind on.
So those problems can be addressed with base rates and utility rates, correct?
That's
so I kind of see those as a side issue.
That's correct.
Bob and Cami, Mayor Spear, one of the questions I've got is we're looking at the state of our state and the revenue situation that the state is facing. What kind of things are you seeing ahead on the horizon for Kechi as a result of that?
Cami, I'll let you go first if you want to make comment, but I've got some thoughts on that too.
So as far as 2020, what I've heard is that most of the property taxes is actually still coming in. So I'm hopeful that my 20% reduction that I was kind of forecasting for property tax will be lower than that, or will actually get closer to what we originally budgeted for. As far as 2021, I mean, it's really a guess right now, just as far as, you know, the economy and how the workforce is doing here in this area and how long this pandemic goes on, what kind of impacts we'll have in 2021. I am preparing for impacts in 2021 as far as revenue reductions, and those are included in the forecast that I have in this presentation. But I think outside of the project, we'll be able to mitigate those revenue reductions with operational, you know, kind of non-labor cuts. And that this is kind of a different consideration altogether outside of that.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Bob, you said you.
Yeah, Cami and I have been sitting in on most of the league's conference calls, We're staying up to date on the state of the economy for the state and also what to expect here locally for us. I echo her comments. The only thing I might add is there is some question about sales tax revenues and serious. Now, our sales tax, of course, we get a portion of Sedgwick County, which is divided to us proportionally among the other cities in Sedgwick County. But the state sales tax that comes to us is in question at this point, and we just don't have any figures, nor does the state have any figures to be able to know how that's going to fall out. They do know that sales are down on big ticket items. Car sales are down 15% in the state, and we're so, you know, people haven't been able to go out and buy these, buy the things they normally would during the pandemic. It's just hard to say if that's going to change, and if it does, how it'll change.
Yeah, and I was trying to, we don't have a huge reliance. Let's see. I mean, we bring in about $300,000 in sales tax. So it's half of what we bring in property tax. I know motor vehicle sales are down, and so that'll be part of it as well. But there's also some opinions out there that, you know, as the price of cars starts to decline, that might actually start picking back up again, because people who normally weren't going to be in the market for a car will be in the market for a car now when the prices start dropping. I mean, it's kind of, you're constantly hearing both sides of the coin, I guess.
Another footnote to that too is there's probably going to be intense competition for used cars in the near future. Hertz has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and there's an expectation that they're going to dump lots of their rental cars on the market.
One other question I had in regards to our financing assumption comparison is we're looking at this as financing for a 20+ year project. The interest rates today aren't they about as favorable as they've ever been? If we were going to do this, is this the time to do it?
Well, it is the time to do it, not only for the interest rates, but I think for the nature of the improvement. If there was any time to consider burying and this is the major part of our discussion this evening, if there's any time to consider the burying of the power lines, this is the time to do it. We won't get a second chance at it. And so it's really difficult not to focus on the numbers. Those numbers are, or look at them as expenses, because they're real dollars that we're going to spend, and regardless of which way we go. But one of the things that we haven't really discussed is the investment potential of what we're investing in, with the objective of attracting businesses and making the commitment to encourage growth and development in that district with the improvements that are made. All along, we've looked at it as an expense, but again, we need, the only way we can really look at it as an investment is if we are fully committed to making it happen one way or the other.
And in my projections, the interest rate is 3.5%. So, and that's the interest rate that our financial advisors were using in their assumption as well. So, I mean, if we're able to get a lower interest rate, that of course will impact the annual debt service payment.
I have a question. On the above ground, 142,000. Now, did that include PEC redesigning what they've done?
Yes, that includes $100,000 for the redesign.
Okay, and so the above ground that we have, do we have any other below ground utilities in Kechi? Would this be the first above ground, below, underground utilities that we have? Are there any other below ground utilities in Kechi?
Yes, ma'am. We have a number of utilities that run underground in that area. AT&T has fiber running through that area. Plus the city has water and gas. And of course, with the addition of the intersection project, we will also have stormwater drains. So those structures would be located underground too, to compete with those utilities that are already present there. And because of the limited space, that's why we moved ahead the gas relocation to get it out of that area so that we don't have to compete for the space.
So Evergy, are there any buried utility poles with Evergy or not in Kechi? Or would this be the first?
Are there buried utilities? Is that your question?
For Evergy.
For Evergy, no, we have several locations already out along Tigwa. And all of the businesses out there, I think all of the businesses are located underground. And I'll correct myself if I'm wrong. We have the Northwoods development has all of the utilities underground. And I don't recall, I believe Prairie Creek is all underground too.
I believe it is.
So the newer developments, we have run those utilities underground.
Okay.
Are we going to require the stormwater addition, whether we bury the other utilities underground or not?
You mean the stormwater drainage? Is that your question?
Yes.
The stormwater drainage is part of the curb and guttering that goes along with the street design. That's included to improve the drainage in that area. That is being funded as part of the street project itself, and there's no additional funds from stormwater being devoted to that.
So there would be no change in the way the stormwater is handled, whether we bury the other utilities or not. Is that correct? If it's part of the gutter.
Yes, the stormwater, if we went above ground, the stormwater storm drains would still be installed as part of the road project.
Underground.
Yes.
Okay.
So Bob, I think I heard you say you were looking for a decision tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct. We've had Evergy and PEC on hold for the last few weeks, pending a decision of which way to go. They cannot move forward until the council renders a definitive decision on which way they want to go. So it is holding up the project. At this point, we're not in a time crunch because we bought some extra time, but it's something that they're going to want to get started on so that they don't find themselves running behind on a schedule.
What is it that our decision, what is it in their work that hinges on our decision?
Well, the design of whether it goes above ground or underground. If it goes underground, that's what they've been working on at this point, up to this point. If it changes, then they're going to have to locate power poles above ground, which would require the purchase of additional right-of-way and also the rerouting of the power lines where they would have run those underground. They've run them in a completely different location in some instances than where they run currently. It's not like they just remove the poles and bury them where they're at, or in that same right of way, they have rerouted some of the services for the most efficient connection to homes and excuse me, homes and businesses in the area.
So if I look at all the competing factors here that are affecting this decision, it seems to me the bonds on the city building and the police building aren't really soon enough to majorly solve this issue, though in the out years it would. The 3 or 6 mills that's going to the highway fund now, I don't want to mess with that. Looking back at the spirit of what the council made that decision based on, was to say that money, we're wanting it to go there because we want to make sure we take care of the streets that need to be repaired in the capital improvement plan, of which this was not a part. So that leaves us with needing additional revenue sources, and we've discussed additional revenue sources in recent years related to the wastewater, or not wastewater, the stormwater utility, adding some sort of revenue there, and we've obviously struggled to find that as well. I'm not against this, but until we have the revenue sources at least defined and give the citizens an opportunity to input on how much of additional revenue source they're willing to absorb and in what form, I'm struggling trying to figure out how I give a yes or a no on this, on burying or keeping the lines above ground. But I'd like to hear some input from some other council members or the mayor.
Bob, I have a question. Have we exhausted our negotiations with Evergy?
No, we haven't. In fact, I'm waiting for directive from the council as to which way they want to go. If they want to go above ground, then I can take that back to them. If there's any of these other financial numbers that they want, then I'll take that as well and give them that. Those, whatever number the council decides on would be a bottom line, a take it or leave it.
So this evening, the council could make a motion to do this if we hit it at Evergy at 1.6 or 1.7. Council could make a motion on that tonight, or whatever number they felt comfortable with.
As long as I have a clear directive from the council on to allow them to continue with their design or to redesign based on the preferences of the council. That's what I'm looking for, so that we can continue moving forward with this project if the council so decides.
So, Bob, we really have more than the 4 choices laid out here. We could come back and say, we will vote to put it underground if Evergy will do it for, say, $500,000. So these are just 4 options. We've got many more options, don't we?
Absolutely. These are just examples that we've put forward based on some of the numbers that we have come up with.
I have a hard time saying yay or nay on any of the options until we know what the cost is. You know, we need Evergy to give us a number.
They have given us a number, and we're at the point now we can either take the number they've given us and either, and it's up to the council. Council can either accept that and say, yes, we'll go with that number, or they can say no and not go with any of the numbers that have been proposed here. Again, these are just illustrative examples.
Well, so what's the number that Evergy has given us?
They have reduced their initial number. I don't have the exact number, but it's around $865,000.
The blue line, basically.
It,
right?
yeah, it's represented in the blue line is the current estimate we have from everyone. The orange and gray lines are additional assumptions if we were to ask Evergy to reduce their cost even more.
So when this project was started, were we aware that we were going to have to raise taxes on our citizens?
Well, the jury's still out on the raising of taxes, but that is one option of many that the council can consider.
But I was just told that if we even do the utilities above ground, we still have to find other revenue sources, which means raise taxes.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean raising taxes. If, as an example, if the council were to adopt a stormwater fee, then because we fund the stormwater revenues transferred from the general fund, then that dedicated source for the stormwater fees would no longer be needed from the general fund. Those additional funds within the general fund could then be used as additional capital that could be put toward this project.
I'm struggling with not having a definitive cost from Evergy, in all honesty. And I don't know what leverage we have with them, but in a way I feel like that they're playing us to get the maximum amount of us that they can get. So I'm kind of like Margaret, and until I have a definitive cost, it's really hard to make a decision. But I don't know what those negotiations with Evergy's like. Does that make sense?
Well, they have given us a definitive number, and it's that top line. Again, if the council wants to offer a counter proposal, that's what I'm asking, will ask tonight. If through the discussion, the council decides that none of these numbers are correct and to go for a lower number, then I'm willing to do that. It's at this point, it's in the council's hands to decide whether they want to pay the $865,000 roughly and go underground, or if they want to stay above ground, or not do the project at all is still an option, and return the grant money to the Department of Transportation.
So if we come up with a counter proposal number for Evergy, it's one that we're going to have to live by. I mean,
yes,
just for,
if the council gives me a mandate and a number to take back to Evergy, then that's gospel as far as I'm concerned.
But didn't we start out with Evergy with the 1.5 million, then they went down to 800,000? Because Evergy, their figure was comparable to our grant. And then you negotiated and went down to $800,000, $860,000 or something.
Real quickly, when we first started discussing this, Evergy shot us a figure at $2 million. And that was an estimate. And then they refined the estimate down to $1.5 million and refined it even further after they got some bids from contractors. And the number, taking it down to $865,000, is the allowable offset. They're saying it would cost them $865,000. I'm sorry, it would cost them $300,000 to place the lines above ground, and so that's the offset that we're seeing down to $865,000, is that $300,000 reduction from the number that they proposed in their final offer.
Council, I'd just like to say that we're going to need to end this in about 5 minutes. So any other discussion after that we'll need to do in an open meeting at council.
So Bob, is a commitment one way or the other to Evergy a commitment to do the project?
I will say that Evergy and PEC and those involved in the relocation of utilities are interested in a commitment from the council.
So what we really need to determine is how much are we willing to pay to have them underground? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. And not only that, but knowing that there needs to be new revenue sources in the future, regardless of the choice made tonight. That I think the big question is there a commitment by this council to either believe or commit the city to coming up with new revenue sources by the time that the payment on the obligations are due?
Bob, I'm not sure I understood what you were saying on my question. If we commit, let's say we countered them $100,000 and they said yes, does that commit us to doing this project?
Well, I believe the commitment is already there. We've signed a commitment with KDOT to do this project. Now, are there terms in that commitment to be able to back out of it? I assume there is, but I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to look through the agreement with the city attorney and see what our recourse would be.
Without knowing how we're going to pay for the entire project, and obviously the Evergy's a fairly significant portion, but it's not even half. Without knowing how we're going to pay for that and floating that past the citizens for this new revenue, I don't know how I don't know how I as a council person push to move forward.
I think as a council person and as a citizen of Kechi, I would like to see the project go forward because many people are looking for this project to beautify our city. But I know we have to find a way to pay for this. But I think that we are looking at the citizens too. This is something that the citizens do want.
Right, and yeah, I agree.
I'll just say, as someone who sat through the community meetings on this, raising taxes and new revenue sources was not a topic that was covered.
And it is the citizens who will be paying for it one way or the other.
Well, at this point, council, I'm going to need for us to wrap this up so that we can go ahead and get reset for a council meeting with a reminder that we will all need to log out of this, and our guests who are going to be joining us on city council meeting will need to log in with the other Zoom number that was sent to all of you. Were there any questions about that?
Yes, I have one. Can you hear me?
This sounds like,
Craig.
yes, Craig, you were supposed to be on the next meeting here.
Yeah, I understand, but I only got one number is what I'm saying. Is there another number I need, or?
Mr.
I've been
Crocker,
listening in for the last 15 minutes. I'm sorry, but.
Bob, you're on mute.
So I can just use that same number is what I'm asking. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Bob, you're on mute.
I will send you a new number. Thanks for that, Cammie.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
okay, so at this point, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn. Brian Adams.
My second, Betty Washington.
Motion by Brian, a second by Betty. All in favor to adjourn, say aye.
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 Okay, that carries, and we'll be back in 5 minutes on the other Zoom meeting number to start our city council meeting. Thank you, everyone.